The classroom never felt this quiet during the day. In the late afternoon, when the last footsteps had faded down the hallway and the sun leaned low against the tall windows, the room softened into something intimate, almost private. Dust drifted slowly in the golden light, hovering like it had nowhere else to be. The chalkboard still carried the faint ghosts of earlier lessons, half-erased words, pale smudges of intent, while the desk stood in neat, obedient rows, waiting. She sat near the window, her notebook open but untouched. Outside, the sky was slowly changing color, pale blue melting into something warmer, something uncertain. Inside, she could feel the weight of the quiet pressing gently against her chest, the kind of silence that made thoughts louder, heavier. Her fingers traced the edge of the paper, slow and absent-minded, as if delaying something she couldn't name. He was a few rows behind her. Not close enough to touch. Not far enough to ignore. He leaned back in his chair, arms folded loosely, eyes not on the board but on her, on the way her hair caught the light, on the barely perceptible rise and fall of her shoulders as she breathed. He told himself he was just resting his eyes. He told himself this moment was ordinary. But it wasn't. It never was, not when she was near. Their friendship had always lived in quiet spaces. Shared glances instead of conversations. Long pauses where words felt unnecessary. Years of sitting beside each other, close but never crossing the invisible line they both pretended didn't exist. She shifted slightly in her seat, and the movement pulled his attention tighter. Her sleeve slid up just enough to reveal the thin bracelet around her wrist. A small, imperfect circle etched into the metal. The secret circle. His throat tightened. No one else knew what it meant. No one else ever asked. To the world, it was just a shape, meaningless and forgettable. But between them, it carried weight. It was their symbol, drawn once on the corner of a notebook years ago during a moment of shared vulnerability neither of them ever talked about afterward. A promise without words. A shelter without walls. She glanced back at him then, as if sensing his thoughts. Their eyes met. The air shifted. It was subtle, almost invisible, but both of them felt it, the tightening of something fragile, the awareness of being seen in a way that felt dangerously close to being understood. Her lips parted slightly, not to speak, just to breathe, and he felt the moment stretch longer than it should have. She looked away first. Her heart was beating faster now, a quiet rhythm she hoped he couldn't hear. She told herself to focus on the notebook, on the blank page in front of her, but the words wouldn't come. All she could think about was the warmth of his presence behind her, familiar and unsettling all at once. Why does it feel different today? She had asked herself that question before, many times, but today the answer felt closer, heavier. Today, the silence between them wasn't comfortable. It was charged. He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the desk. Still pretending to study? He asked softly. His voice wasn't teasing. It was gentle, almost careful, like he was afraid to disturb something delicate. She smiled without turning around. Still pretending not to stare. She replied. The honesty of it surprised them both. A quiet laugh escaped him, low and brief. Maybe. The word lingered between them. She turned then, fully this time, twisting in her chair to face him. Their knees were almost aligned, separated only by the narrow space between desks. Close enough to notice the faint crease between his brows, the seriousness he rarely let anyone see. You okay? She asked. He hesitated. That hesitation said more than words ever could. Yeah, he said finally. Just tired. She knew that wasn't the truth. Her gaze dropped to his hand resting on the desk. Without thinking, she reached forward and gently turned his palm upward. The movement was instinctive, intimate, and when she realized what she was doing, her breath caught. For a moment, neither of them moved. Her thumb traced a small circle in the center of his palm. The secret circle. His breath hitched. The world outside the classroom seemed to fall away, replaced by the hum of the lights, the sound of their own breathing, the unbearable closeness of everything unsaid. His fingers curled slightly, not quite holding her hand, but not letting go either. This isn't, he started, then stopped. She looked up at him, eyes wide but steady. I know, she whispered. Footsteps echoed faintly in the hallway. Both of them froze. Her hand slipped away from his as if burned, her body turning back toward the window just as the sound passed by. The door handle rattled once, then went still. They sat in silence, hearts racing, the realization settling slowly between them. They had almost been seen. Not just together, but felt. And neither of them knew how to go back to pretending after that. The footsteps faded, but the echo they left behind stayed. It lingered in the room like a held breath neither of them dared to release. The classroom returned to its stillness, yet something fundamental had shifted, an invisible crack in the quiet that refused to close. She sat rigid now, shoulders tense, eyes fixed on the window as if the sky outside might offer instructions on how to feel normal again. Behind her, he hadn't moved. His hand still rested where hers had been, palm warm, fingers faintly curled, the ghost of her touch alive in his skin. He stared at the desk as if it could explain what had just happened, as if the wood grain might rearrange itself into answers. Almost seen. The phrase repeated in both of their minds, not as fear, but as something sharper, realization. She broke the silence first, her voice barely more than air. That was close. He swallowed. Yeah. Another pause stretched between them, long and delicate. He could hear the faint tick of the clock above the door, every second pronounced, merciless. He leaned back slowly, careful not to scrape the chair, careful not to make the moment louder than it already was. You shouldn't have done that, he said quietly. She turned halfway, just enough to see his face in her peripheral vision. His expression wasn't angry. It was conflicted, almost wounded. I know, she replied. But I didn't plan it. The honesty sat heavy between them. He exhaled, rubbing his thumb against his index finger, a nervous habit she recognized instantly. That's what scares me. Her chest tightened. For years, their closeness had lived safely behind intention. They chose where to sit. They chose when to speak. They chose restraint. But what had just happened, her hand in his, the circle traced without thought, had come from somewhere deeper, somewhere unguarded. She stood abruptly, the chair legs whispering against the floor. Moving toward the window, she pressed her forehead lightly against the glass, cool and grounding. Outside, the campus was nearly empty now, the late afternoon light thinning into something duskier, softer. I don't want to ruin this, she said. Whatever this is. He watched her reflection in the glass, her eyes darker now, more exposed than she realized. Neither do I. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't empty. He stood too, closing the distance by only a step, careful not to cross into something undeniable. The air between them felt charged, humming softly, like a warning and an invitation tangled together. Do you ever think about it? She asked suddenly. Think about what? He said, though he already knew. She hesitated, fingers curling against the window frame. About what we're not saying. His answer came too quickly. All the time. Her breath caught. She turned to face him fully now. The classroom seemed smaller, the walls closer, the quiet more intense. The fading light painted his face in warm shadows, softening him, making him look less guarded, more real. I tell myself it's safer this way, she continued, her voice trembling just slightly. That staying like this means we don't lose each other. He nodded slowly. I tell myself the same thing. Their eyes held, neither willing to look away. The space between them pulsed with everything they had buried, late-night messages unsent, glances held too long, moments like this one that had always stopped just short of truth. She reached into her pocket, fingers brushing something familiar. Without speaking, she pulled it out, a folded scrap of paper, worn thin with age. She opened it carefully. A small circle, hand-drawn, imperfect. The secret circle. I kept it, she said. All these years. His chest tightened. He hadn't realized how much it mattered until now. So did I. He reached into his bag and retrieved his notebook, flipping to the back page. There it was, faded but unmistakable. The same circle. The same promise. They stood there, mirrors of each other, exposed in a way neither of them had prepared for. That circle, he said softly, it was never just a symbol, was it? She shook her head. It was permission. Permission for what? He asked, though his voice trembled. She stepped closer, close enough now that he could feel the warmth of her presence, the steady rhythm of her breath. To feel what we weren't ready to name. The words settled between them like a fragile truth. For a moment, it felt as though the entire world had narrowed to this space, to the hum of the lights, the fading sun, the quiet intensity of two people standing at the edge of something irreversible. Then the hallway noise returned. Louder this time. Voices. Laughter. The unmistakable sound of someone approaching. Her eyes widened. Instinctively, she stepped back, folding the paper quickly, tucking it away as if hiding it could erase what it represented. He moved too, creating distance, returning to his desk with practiced ease. The door handle turned. They both held their breath. But the door didn't open. The voices passed. The laughter faded. Relief washed over them, but it was tangled with something else now. Something restless. Something awake. He looked at her, really looked, and realized with startling clarity that pretending would never feel the same again. Not after this. Not after the circle had resurfaced. Not after almost being seen. The room felt different now, charged, unsettled, as if it had absorbed their secrets and was quietly holding onto them. They didn't sit back down. Instead, they stood on opposite sides of the classroom, the distance between them no longer neutral but intentional, fragile. The desks that once felt orderly now seemed like barriers, reminders of rules and roles neither of them had asked for but both had learned to obey. She moved first, slowly, walking toward the teacher's desk at the front of the room. Her fingers brushed its edge, grounding herself in the familiarity of the space. She had spent years here, listening, learning, pretending, but today, the classroom felt like a witness. He watched her from where he stood, his thoughts louder than the silence around them. Every instinct told him to stay still, to let this moment pass the way all the others had. But something in her posture, the tension in her shoulders, the way she pressed her lips together as if holding back words, told him this moment would not be contained so easily. Do you remember, she said quietly, not turning around, the day we drew it? The question landed softly, but it struck deep. He nodded. You were upset. You wouldn't tell me why. She smiled faintly, a sad curve of her lips. I didn't know how. He took a step forward, then stopped, giving her space. You didn't have to. She turned then, leaning back against the desk, her arms folded loosely as if bracing herself. That's the problem. With you, I never had to explain anything. And somehow, that made it harder. The truth of it settled between them, heavy and intimate. He leaned against a desk across from her, mirroring her posture without realizing it. I thought the circle meant we'd be okay, he admitted. Like, no matter what, we'd stay the same. Her eyes softened. I thought it meant we were allowed to feel more. Their gazes locked, the difference between those interpretations suddenly clear, and devastating. Outside, the sky deepened into evening. The light through the windows dimmed, shadows stretching across the floor, wrapping the room in a quiet intimacy that felt almost dangerous. The world was moving on without them, unaware of the fragile moment unfolding here. She uncrossed her arms, her hands restless now. Sometimes, she said, hesitating, I replay moments in my head. Small ones. Things no one else would notice. He knew exactly what she meant. The way you wait for me after class, she continued. The way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention. His breath slowed. You notice that? I notice everything, she said softly. He swallowed. Then you know this has been breaking me. Her eyes widened just slightly. For years, he went on, choosing each word carefully, I've lived inside the almost. Almost saying something. Almost reaching for you. Almost being honest. She pushed off the desk, stepping closer now, the space between them shrinking again. Why didn't you? He laughed quietly, without humor. Because I was afraid that if I said it out loud, I'd lose you. Her voice trembled. I was afraid of the same thing. The realization hung there, aching and exposed. He lifted his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he reached just far enough to touch the edge of her sleeve, his fingers barely grazing the fabric. The contact was light, careful, but it sent a shiver through both of them. She looked down at his hand, then back up at him. This feels different now, she whispered. It is, he said. Because we can't pretend we don't know anymore. Her fingers brushed his wrist, tentative, almost questioning. What if knowing changes everything? He met her gaze, steady despite the storm inside him. What if it already has? Silence wrapped around them. Again, but this time, it was full. Heavy with things hovering just beneath the surface, waiting to be spoken. Her thumb traced a small circle on his wrist without thinking, repeating the familiar motion. The secret circle. His breath caught sharply. That symbol, he said, voice low, it's everywhere with us, isn't it? She nodded. It follows us. Because it's not really about the drawing. Then what is it about? He asked. She hesitated, vulnerability flickering across her face. About choosing each other in quiet ways. Even when we're scared. Something in his expression shifted then, resolve breaking through restraint. He stepped closer, close enough now that the air between them felt thin, electric. If I choose you out loud, he said carefully, there's no taking it back. Her heart raced. I know. They stood on the edge of it, the truth, the confession, the moment that would change the shape of everything they had been protecting. The classroom seemed to hold its breath with them, the hum of the lights growing louder in the quiet. Footsteps echoed again in the hallway. This time, neither of them moved. She reached into her pocket, pulling out the folded paper once more. She unfolded it slowly and held it between them, the imperfect circle visible in the dim light. This was never meant to keep us silent, she said. It was meant to keep us safe. He looked at the circle, then back at her. And what if safety isn't enough anymore? Her lips parted, the answer forming, dangerously close to being spoken. The door handle clicked. They both turned toward the sound, hearts pounding, the weight of everything unsaid pressing hard against their chests. This time, it didn't feel like fear. It felt like inevitability.